good as far as it went. I'd say that today's budget was a start on levelling up the north, but only a modest start. The government has made a lot of promises to people here over recent months, particularly at the election, and I'm afraid what we got today, the modest package of measures, didn't quite live up to that rhetoric. So they're going to have to do quite a lot more later this year in the spending review if they're going to get the Northern powerhouse done, to use the Chancellor's phrase.
Interesting that you say it's modest, because some economists have suggested that potentially there's too much spending going on.
Well, I'm just looking at it from my point of view. Mm-hmm. Obviously, they're looking across the board, aren't they? I'm looking at it from this whole question of the North and investing in the North, levelling up. So we're being promised very welcome funding, I might say, transport investment from 22, 23 onwards. That isn't going to do anything to change the buses on our roads now, bring down bus fares now. And these are the kind of issues that the government has raised expectations on. So, as far as we're concerned, as I say, it doesn't live up to the rhetoric. But nevertheless, there are some positive announcements in there, and there is certainly significant investment for transport over the medium term. So I'm not being hopefully overly negative. I'm trying to call it straight. But it doesn't change the reality of public transport in Greater Manchester for anybody in the next 2 or 3 years. This
was just a Labour budget, wasn't it?
Well, there was nothing on social care. And, I mention that because it's 10 years ago this month that I published a white paper on the funding of social care. Now,
the big unanswered issue.
Well, we answered it there, and obviously some people disagreed with it, but at least it was a plan that would have prevented people selling their homes.
Well, unanswered by this government, though.
Yeah, and if you remember, the Prime Minister stood on the steps of Number 10 saying that he had a plan, and today it's, we'll bring forward a plan. We need much more urgency in this question. The quality of social care is nowhere near good enough, and as I say, every month that goes by when there isn't a solution, that's a month where thousands more people have been forced to sell everything that they've worked for. And that isn't good enough, as far as I'm concerned.
Some real positives for the North, though. £2.5 billion pothole fund, which is the biggest programme of public investment ever, including £27 billion for strategic roads. Obviously not all of that being spent in the North, but much of it will be.
Yeah, but, potholes is sort of patching and mending, isn't it? Why do we have potholes all over the North? It's because the government has cut northern councils harder than it has councils elsewhere. I mean, that is just a fact. And, it's almost them sort of coming forward now to sort of patch up some of what they got wrong. So I'm afraid you'll have to forgive me if I don't sort of stand there and give them wild applause for a pothole fund.
But if you look at transport...
And also road building is not really a kind of climate-friendly approach, is it? It's surely public transport should have been a higher priority in this budget. Bring down bus fares, deal with the outrageous injustice of a bus fare in the North costing £4, whereas £1.50 in London. I think those kind of measures would have been much more welcome.
Although when you look at transport and infrastructure spending, tripled. Highest levels since 1955. So it is hard for Labour to criticise that, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think I said at the beginning, I'm not necessarily criticising that investment. That is welcome. But it alone doesn't level up the North. Investment in infrastructure isn't investment in everyday revenue funding for transport. London has had that for decades, and consequently, fares for buses and tubes in London are much, much lower there than they are here. So, yes, investment in infrastructure is part of the story, but it's not the whole story. And we need revenue funding into public transport if we're to get a service here that is comparable with London. The Chancellor spoke about that. I'm pleased to hear him speaking in those terms, but I don't believe he's produced the package of funding needed to level up transport in the North to London standards.
What do you make of these London-style funding settlements for all 8 metro mayors worth £4.2 billion, according to Rishi Sunak?
Well, of course, that's positive, and we welcome it, and it reflects what we've been calling for, that there will be discretion at the level of mayors to decide how best to allocate that funding. It kind of says it has to be signed off and agreed by the government, which doesn't sound like true devolution to me. But let's not be overly negative. That is a positive move, and it means we can plan now to get the investment into our tram system up here, or into improving the way the train system works. So that is positive, but I keep coming back. It's not quite what I thought we were promised, and the government are going to have to work a bit harder if they're to deliver. The Prime Minister is fond of saying that people in the North lent him their votes. Well, I don't think he's repaid those loans today.
Is it positive that there's talk of this new economic campus in Northern England, which will include 750 staff from the Treasury and other departments? I mean, essentially, it will involve 22,000 civil servants ending up outside of London once all of the plans take place. That's got to be a good thing.
Yes, that is a good thing. I'm very pleased to hear that that type of rebalancing is going to become a reality. I think one of the problems we've always had in this country is that people making the decisions on spending have pretty much been based within the M25. So to hear that's about to change in a meaningful way is very positive. So yeah, I mean, I think the sooner the better that happens. And again, I would say let's make this a start rather than the whole story. If the country is to be rebalanced and levelled up, I think it requires more than I think what people have faced up to so far. It means putting the North at the front of the queue for all infrastructure investment, not for a couple of years, not for one budget, but probably for 30 years. That is the scale of what is needed, such as the scale of the divide between North and South.
So what mark would you give Rishi Sunak so far? I mean, are you talking a solid B+ here?
I think so. I think you're looking at a 6 or 7, maybe 6 more. I think it was on. To be honest with you, I'd heard the rhetoric from ministers. I'd written down all their promises over recent months, and I don't think it quite came up to what I was hoping for.
But no one's going to get everything they want, are they? I just wonder if it's a little bit difficult for you because you are a Labour mayor, and at the end of the day, these policies are very good for the North, but it's quite difficult for you to be too positive about this government.
No, it's not difficult at all, because it's not about the party politics for me. I've always said that if they do the right thing, I'll say so. If they do the wrong thing, I'll say so. I'm trying to call it straight. You've just got to put yourself in my shoes. I've been sitting here when they've been wandering up in the election campaign, promising the tram system to Stockport, the tram system to Bolton, London-style buses. What we got today doesn't deliver that. So you've just got to sort of see it from my point of view.
Now, Andy, just before you go, obviously I know you are knee-deep in this coronavirus crisis. What did you make of Rishi Sunak's pledge, and how are you coping in Greater Manchester right now? What do you need?
I think he was strong on coronavirus, and the whole question of insulating businesses in terms of their cash flow and protecting people through difficult times. I think the government has broadly got it right so far. If I was again to point to one thing that I thought wasn't strong enough, it's the whole question of people who are low paid but also self-employed. So I'm thinking there of taxi drivers or people working as delivery men or women. That I think is still a chink here in the armour, because what I heard today doesn't quite give people the confidence, I don't think, to self-isolate on day one, because I'm not sure the money comes in as quickly as that, but they may not have that choice. So I think, if I look at the coronavirus plans, and bear in mind I dealt with swine flu a decade ago for the then Labour government, I do have a knowledge of these things. I think it's broadly there, but I still think that's a bigger issue that they've not really fully faced up to. There are many more people working in that kind of insecure, self-employed status than there were a decade ago. And that could present a real problem. I had a case recently, not far from here, where a taxi driver who was in contact with somebody diagnosed and who tested positive just said, well, they just couldn't afford to self-isolate, so they were going straight back to work. And it's that kind of situation that could
spread the virus.
I'm afraid, be an Achilles heel for the government strategy.
And are you shaking hands?
It's kind of stopped now. I think everyone's kind of got used to the new world, haven't they? So,
okay. Well, I'll give you a virtual fist bump today.
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay.
Nice talking to you, Dan.
Thank you, Andy.